Really, I wouldn't lie to you this time. I tried to explain to Wifey, I'm just driving around Salt Lake, and these radios, they leap out of people's houses right into the back of the car, and they follow me home. I don't know how to explain it. I get home, I open the back of the car, and there's a radio. So what else am I supposed to do? I have to put it in with the rest of the stuff. Well, this one followed me home. This is a Philco 3936. It's a neat radio. I know almost nothing about it except that I have 2 or 3 radios that have this dial face and this this knob design. But I like this one because it's more squared off looking than some of the others that I have. And it's made in a time, 1939 was really good time for Philco. Their radios were some of the better performing radios on the market. And this particular style has a distinctive sort of high-end look to it that I really like. So this radio will be a fun one to restore. I've got so many radios to restore, I'm not sure when I'll get around to it. But the wood is in good shape. The dial face is decent, it's salvageable, and all of the buttons have been replaced already. The person that owned this radio had done a little bit of work to it, recapped it, and some of the things he did I would like to change, and I will do that. But for the most part, this radio is in decent shape and it plays well enough. So I think this will be a nice project. It'll be fun to have around, and I'm not sure when I'll get to it, but someday I will. Okay, let's tie some harness together now. There's nothing magical about this, and I was never a Boy Scout, so tying knots is not my forte, but I think I can manage this. The key is getting started, making it nice and tight when you get started. So this is really strong cotton cord. It's really handy. I've never tried it for dial string, but it's a little bit thin, but I bet it would work for dial string too, because the stuff is strong. Put a little beeswax in it to make it a little sticky, and I think it would work really good. Just kind of get started. There. Alright. Now, then you have to pull a length, because you have to have this be free of the spool in order for you to be able to do what I need to do. So I just come down about 3 inches, loop it over. Okay, when I loop it over, the key is, and I did this wrong, so just so you know, when you loop it over, you want to come back through the first sort of length of it, so that when you pull it tight, it kind of makes a straight line like that. And then you can pull it tight, and it'll stay tight long enough for you to get to the next 3 inches. And believe it or not, this is quite effective. So you come down another 3 inches. I hate working with string. Cats love it though. I'll tell you something, if Buster or Freddy were in here right now, I'd never get this done. Especially that little kitten Freddy, he'd drive you crazy. You try to keep them all sort of in a straight line if you can. It's going to deviate a little bit, but that's kind of how they were done in the old Zeniths. So I put my thumb there, like so. Let me see if you can see me. I put my thumb there. I make a loop. It takes 3 hands to do this. I make a loop. I go back through the original the length, the straight length of it. Pull it through like so, and then give it a tug. Make it tight. Okay, and the thing is, if you pull each one tight, then they'll all be continuously getting tightened. It doesn't take long for you to get through the whole thing. So you come down, you make a loop,
and you go through. It's really a simple thing, and I don't know if it's exactly authentic, but you know what, it looks pretty good, and it does a really good job if you use strong cord of keeping that that wire harness together. You'd be surprised how good a job it does. And it's kind of adjustable before you pull it real tight. And I like cotton because if you use like a polyester cord or some other kind of synthetic cord, it's slippery, and so it won't want to stay tight. Like this cotton, you can pull it tight long enough for it to stay till you get to the next knot. So that's why I like cotton. It's kind of, you know, it has enough sort of self friction that you can pull it tight and it'll stay there. All right, so now I've gotten to a junction of wires. So the key here is to kind of go around that junction, but what you want to do, what I saw them do on the Zeniths, is then you wrap it a few times at that junction so you can make it good and tight there. And there was nothing neat and tidy about it. I've looked at them close, and they didn't have, there was nothing that was especially pretty about it. It's just pretty because it's old and cool, you know, but if you were to look at it from the perspective of being made yesterday, you wouldn't say it was pretty. How you tie it, now I try to tie a couple of knots here to make this a little more secure. There. Okay, now that will stay tight long enough for me to get around that and to slip right through it to this point right here, see? Piece of cake. And I'll wrap a couple times on this too. Okay, go around that one more time here. And some people like to, you know, I got a friend who does radios, and he likes to do twice at each point, but that's not what they did when they made them, so it is stronger. I know what he's talking about, like I just did. They stay tight longer. His string will stretch a little bit over time, so it's okay if it's pretty tight. And it'll make the cord want to curve a little bit, but actually you can use that tendency to your advantage when you're wrapping around turns and things. Just lay the cord a certain way. It'll look like it had been there a long time and kind of took a set, you know. And I try different knots, you know, I'm always experimenting to try and make them stronger and able to stay tight longer. I usually wind up coming back to the original. And the distance you go between knots is really not that critical. Know that the more knots you put in, the shorter the distance between them, the more, the tighter the cord will seem, the harness will seem, but yet also the more it'll want to tend to curl a little bit sometimes, you know. But it's really a 10-minute affair. It doesn't take long. And I think it looks every bit as good. I actually like to see the cord, or the wires in the harness. So I think it looks every bit as good as covering it with the plastic sheath, which I call the carcass, except that it isn't quite original RCA, but it looks, I do a lot of Zeniths for people, a lot of Philcos, and it looks perfectly fine for those radios, especially Zeniths. When you get down to the end, you're going to do the usual loop. And if you're like me, you run short about 4 inches every time you do it. So you tie that last knot, you wrap it a time or two, and this way I won't have to cut off any string because I'm barely going to make it. Sometimes on this last bit where I'm tying it off and I don't want it to come loose, there's a couple things I do. One of those is to run it back under the straight section and then come back through the loop and make one more knot. Now those knots, you know, if you know about knots, they will come loose, but I have a way to take care of that. Okay, so that's on there. See how it wants to take a curve? That's okay. That's okay. It won't hurt anything. Here is what I do to take care of that cord not coming loose. And I do this on the ends of dial strings sometimes too, where I tie a knot and I want to be sure that knot's not going to come loose. This is lacquer fingernail polish jar. It's flat, you know, no gloss lacquer. And I don't know if you can see this, but I just put a little bit on the ends here. You won't be able to hardly see it when it dries. Put a little on the ends here, and that'll keep that knot from coming undone. In fact, if I don't want them to loosen, I might touch just every knot up and down the string. It's not going to hurt a thing. It won't be noticed. And it'll keep those from coming loose. Just touch them. Don't want to use the glossy stuff. You don't want to use enamel because enamel tends to shine more and it takes longer to dry. And I think fingernail polish is actually enamel. I think it's enamel, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I just wait. When my daughter runs out of fingernail polish in a bottle, she saves the bottle for me. She brings them to me whenever she comes back home. She lives up in Portland, but when she comes back home, she'll bring a suitcase full of 5 or 6 empty fingernail polish jars. Alright, so go down to the beginning knot and put a little extra on. Again, you won't be able to see it. I want to show you something. Coming from the category of the people that design it and make it don't use it, look at how far the brush goes down when this cap is screwed all the way on. There's a good 1/4 inch of material, by the way, the widest part of the bottle, so there's quite a bit of material in there that I can't get to with the brush. Now, isn't that stupid? Okay, so maybe 1/8 of an inch, but still, that's a significant amount of material that I can't get to with the brush, and I certainly can't submerge the whole thing. What would be wrong with making the brush a little bit longer than that height so you could get to all of it, and maybe even figure out a way to put the brush to one side, like, you know, when you would put it in, somehow it goes to one side so you can tip the bottle and get the last little bit. But oh no, that would prevent you from buying a new bottle before your old one was run out. Okay, I don't need to have that string on any other part of the cord, so I'm going to let that lacquer dry. I'm going to clip the ends off. I'm going to clip that end off, and there you go. That harness will stay together as long as these people ever want it to. Sometimes, it all depends, sometimes I'll put a little lacquer on the wires themselves, but I've got ink on these wires and I don't want it to bleed. Plus, with these different colors, it will show if I do that. So I'm just going to leave it alone. It'll work fine. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mount this on the radio now.
Hey, guess what? This is my RCA 813K. All along I thought this was an 816K. But I guess they look almost identical, except the 16K has rounded shoulders all the way around the very front, and this one is squared off in the middle part. Other than that, they look about the same. Either way, I really dig this radio, and I'm looking forward to it. I'll probably do this one before I do the 12K. I just kind of like the shape of that big curved glass dial.
I've been working on the RCA, and I've been installing wiring harnesses and installing the dial face bracket and dial face. So let me show you where I'm at right now. The radio, little by little, is getting to look more and more complicated, just like it did when I first started on the thing. So what we have here, it's hard to see here, but right down here I have attached the harness to all of the contacts. Well, actually the contacts were already attached, but I've attached the contact plate, the finger plate, down to the bottom of the drum bracket so that all the fingers now make contact with the drum. I've adjusted those, adjusted the alignment on those, and that makes sure they're centered and no strange wear patterns will happen. I have also taken the motor to reversing switch harness and soldered the ends onto the reversing switch. I mounted the reversing switch, and now I have the wires soldered to the reversing switch. Mounted the harness to the chassis so that when I'm manipulating this, I don't affect any of the solder joints I just made. And I've run this harness up along here. This is where it's going to come out. This is where the fingers will be. For the right hand side, they'll mount in here, and then the fingers for the left hand side will mount over here, and then I'll secure the harness at these points along the back of the dial face. So that part won't take very long. I have all of these light bulb sockets set up with new wire and new shrink tube to kind of protect the wire so it doesn't make contact with anything. So I'll put those in place, and then lastly I have these motor wires that these come from under the chassis from the switch from the mode switch, and these will run off to the motor and they'll tie onto the motor terminals right up here along with the wires from the reversing switch. So a little bit of soldering, but pretty much things are coming together. I'll make some adjustments to the motor placement and the alignment with the gear train. I'll also put a spring. There's a little spring that goes on the mode switch so that when it engages that gear, that spring kind of holds that gear against the gear it mates to. So I'll install that. I'll install the dial cord and the pointer. So at some point during all of that, when I've done all of that, at some point in that process, I'll show you where I'm at on that as well, and I'll film just a couple minutes of that. I don't want to bore you with all the assembly work. This is a really nice and complicated radio, and so I'm taking my time. It makes for very boring YouTube videos. So this is how I'll do it. I'll do it a piece at a time. I'll show you where I'm at, and I'll explain. And anything that comes up that's unusual or might be difficult if you were doing a radio like this, I'll point it out. Ding dong report. When I put that dial face bracket and dial face on this thing and started putting lamps on it, I got about 2/3 of the way through putting lamps on it when I looked down and realized that, wait a minute, there's nowhere to put the dial cord. I forgot completely to put the dial cord wheel on this thing. So I had to take it back apart, and now I've put the dial cord wheel on. I'll get it adjusted. One advantage to this is while I was messing with this, I confirmed that reversing switch, which is back here, right in there, that reversing switch is working correctly. So, and that cam is operating it at the right points. So I will go ahead and get the dial face back on now and continue with the assembly. I'm getting closer. I've got the push button wiring harness installed. All the lamps are installed. And I'm getting ready now to take that motor wiring harness, and it comes around here, and you see it ends up right here, right by the motor. I'm going to have to cut this to length, which I knew I would have to do, and I'll install that on the motor. A couple of wires that come from the switch underneath that I'll install on the motor, and then I believe that's about it for the wiring on the top side. Ooh, getting nervous, because we're getting close. And believe me, I want to get this radio back to the guy that owns it. I don't want to look at it anymore. It's been here a while, and I want him to be happy, and I want to be happy. So I'll get to work. Okay, there we go. Everything is installed. All the wires are in place. Tomorrow when I get home from work, I'm going to put the juice to this thing and see if I can't get it to make some sound like it did before. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be able to. There's one wire that's dangling loose, and I thought I'd point it out to you just in case you might be wondering what it is. This wire here is just in case the owner ever gets lucky enough to find a remote for this radio. See where it says long lead? That's coming off the back of the reversing switch. That long lead goes out to the remote. There's basically a schematic of the remote, or a layout of the remote contacts. You know, it's something I could always build for him too if he was ever interested. So I put the lead in just so that if we ever got to the point we wanted to set the thing up with it, it'd be really easy to do. You build a harness, you got the lead, there you go. But that lead goes down into the radio, so it makes it easier to do if I have that one already installed and ready. I'm actually getting kind of eager to try it out now. A little bit of close-ups. Let me just go around the radio real quick so you can kind of see what it looks like. Doesn't look so complicated now after I've been through it, and I know that's how all radios are. No big deal. I think it's going to be okay. I'll put the juice to it tomorrow, and then I'll know whether it's going to be okay. Once I get it to play and I get the automatic tuning to work okay, well, then I'll go about aligning it. It looks like I left a little bit of some rosin there, so I'll get that off of there. I won't leave that on overnight. And so anyway, once I get the tuning to work okay, well, then I'll go about aligning it. Then I can go ahead and put the cabinet back in the radio. And within a few days, my hope is to have this bugger all buttoned up and ready to go. Check out that dial on the 813K. That is cool. That's why I bought this radio. It's just so imposing. It's a gigantic thing. It has a lot going on, lots of lights, very pretty. The electric tuning is neat. I always thought that was cool. Now I know how to fix it. It's no big deal. This should be a great radio. And for mine, I'm going to build myself a remote because this did not come with a remote. They weren't sold with remotes, and so a lot of them didn't have it. So I'm going to go ahead and build this sucker up. Hopefully I can make this my first project when I get to work on my own radios. Okay, well, I'll let you all go for now. This is Thursday, December 8th, 2016. From Salt Lake City, this is Michael. That's all for now.